"Hey, you're not allowed past this fence," the ranger yelled, voice sharp with authority. But Henry 71 didn't stop running his old bones, carrying him forward like a man half his age. He'd heard something. A child's cry, faint and desperate, calling to instincts honed by war, and just hours later, while sipping coffee on his weathered porch, a black SUV pulled up to his quiet cabin. Out stepped a man in a dark suit, flashing a badge. "United States Secret Service is if this gave you chills. Comment honor for every forgotten hero among us." Henry Matthews, 71, is a retired Army tracker who served 3 tours in Vietnam. His eyes, still sharp as a hawk's, once spotted tripwires and enemy movements that saved countless lives. Now he lives alone in a small wooden cabin at the edge of Pinarest National Forest, with only memories in his aging retriever Max. For company, locals know him as quiet, strange, always watching the tree line. Some call him paranoid behind closed doors. Others just nod respectfully and keep their distance, uncomfortable with the intensity in his gaze. The look of a man who has seen things they couldn't imagine. One crisp autumn afternoon, news spread like wildfire that Senator Claire Whitmore's 6-year-old granddaughter Emily had gone missing during a family hike near Eagles Ridge. She had wandered away while her parents were setting up a picnic, vanishing into the dense forest. Within minutes, helicopters were called and park rangers were deployed in teams. Search and rescue dogs sniffed at her jacket, but 3 hours passed without a single trace, as if the forest had simply swallowed her whole. Henry heard the news at Miller's General Store while buying coffee and dog food, as others whispered and speculated with morbid fascination. He set his items down, paid silently, grabbed his gnarled oak walking stick, and quietly disappeared into the woods, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Deep in the forest, where the search grid had been established, 2 young rangers spotted him crossing into restricted terrain and intercepted him. "Sir, you're not allowed past this point. This is an official search area. I've tracked things harder to find than a scared child," Henry replied calmly. His voice carrying the quiet confidence of decades of experience. They scoffed, exchanging glances that clearly said, "Crazy old man." The taller one spoke with barely concealed disdain. "The last thing we need is some elderly civilian getting lost too. We've got enough problems." But Henry simply walked around them as if they were just more obstacles in the terrain. 2 hours later, far from the organized search parties, he found what they had missed. Tiny footprints beside a creek bed and a torn piece of pink cloth caught on a thorny branch, signs invisible to untrained eyes by dusk as search teams were being recalled. Henry emerged from the deepening shadows carrying the child in his arms, dehydrated, shivering but safe. No media was there to capture the moment. No applause greeted his arrival. Just glares from rangers who didn't appreciate being shown up by a civilian. One of them muttered loud enough to be heard, "Should have left it to the professionals." Henry didn't respond. He just wrapped the girl tighter in his coat and walked away. Disappearing into the gathering darkness that night, Henry sat on his creaking porch, sipping strong black tea. Max, his loyal retriever with a graying muzzle, curled faithfully at his feet. The forest sounds enveloped them in familiar darkness, owls calling questions that would never be answered. A ranger's truck drove by, slowly, headlights deliberately sweeping across Henry's property, the officer inside staring with undisguised resentment. No official had come to thank him. No one had even called to acknowledge what he'd done at the Pinarest diner. The next morning, Henry sat alone at his usual corner table. The conversation around him suspiciously hushed when he entered. A waitress with bottle-blonde hair whispered to another. Not quite quietly enough, he just wants attention. Probably made the whole thing up. A man in an expensive hiking outfit at the next table chuckled. "These veterans always trying to relive their glory days, pathetic." Really, the local newspaper, the Pinarest Gazette, ran a brief article on page 3, "Child found safe after day-long search by park rangers." Henry's name wasn't mentioned, not even in passing, as if Emily had simply decided to wander back on her own. Meanwhile, his neighbor's people, who had lived beside him for 15 years, crossed the street to avoid conversation. A few openly criticized him for going into federal land without authorization. He could have interfered with the official search. Said Mrs. Coleman, who had once brought him Christmas cookies online, community forums labeled him a crazy old vet playing hero in attention, seeking some even suggested he might have hidden the child himself just to find her later through it all. Max whimpered softly beside him, sensing his master's quiet hurt. Henry just scratched. Behind the dog's ears, voice gentle. "Doesn't matter, boy, she's safe." That's all that counts at the ranger station. A closed door or meeting was held about the civilian interference incident. One young officer suggested writing Henry up for obstructing an official search operation. He made us look incompetent, the supervisor said, slamming his coffee mug down. That's not how things work here. We're the professionals. No one in the room mentioned the girl's tiny voice saying, "Thank you, mister." As Henry carried her out of the woods, or how she had clung to his jacket, refusing to be handed over to anyone else that night, a fierce storm rolled through the valley. Rain hammered against Henry's roof, finding a leak that dripped steadily into a pot in his living room. He climbed up alone to patch it temporarily, his joints protesting each movement of the ladder later. With the fire crackling in his stone hearth, he sat in his worn leather chair and opened a faded green journal. Inside were names, dozens of them, soldiers who never made it home from the jungle. He traced his fingers over them one by one, a ritual of remembrance for those the world had already forgotten. If this kind of quiet courage inspires you, comment unfair, because heroes deserve more than silence. 2 mornings later, as mist still clung to the pines like ghostly fingers, a sleek black SUV with government plates pulled up to Henry's modest property. The gravel crunched under its expensive tires, a sound so out of place it brought Max to alert attention, his old ears perking up. A tall man in an impeccably tailored dark suit stepped out, surveyed the surroundings with practice efficiency, then approached the porch where Henry sat calmly whittling a piece of cedar. "Mr. Henry Matthews?" The man asked, his posture and bearing instantly recognizable to Henry as military. Despite the civilian clothes, Henry set down his knife. "That's me." And the man produced credentials with a practiced flick of his wrist. "Special Agent James Monroe, United States Secret Service." Henry raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You took a wrong turn somewhere, son?" The agent's stern expression softened into something resembling respect. "No, sir. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." He handed Henry a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. "This is from someone whose life you touched profoundly," she asked. "That you read it personally." I showed. The inside was a handwritten note on heavy stationery, emblazed with the Senate seal. "Mr. Matthews, I'm told you found my granddaughter when all others had failed. The Rangers explained how you tracked her for miles through terrain they considered impenetrable. Emily speaks of you as her forest angel. You have my eternal gratitude and have earned a debt that can never be fully repaid. Though I intend to try with deepest respect, Senator Claire Whitmore Anoyam." Thus attached was a printed letter, an official combination acknowledging Henry's actions and expertise, signed by both the Department of the Interior and the senator herself. Also enclosed an invitation to Washington, D.C., to be honored at a private ceremony at the White House. Henry looked up, expression unchanged. "I didn't do it for recognition." "I know," Monroe said, his voice gentler than before. "That's precisely why you deserve it." And within days, news had spread nationwide. Vietnam veteran tracker rescue senator's granddaughter using skills military taught him 50 years ago, the twist that captured America's attention. Henry had declined the medal and asked instead for funding for the local search and rescue volunteer team that had been struggling for resources. The internet exploded with support. Comments flooded in from across the country. "Real hero. This is what America stands for. We see you, sir, at the ranger station." An uncomfortable silence reigned. The same officers who had mocked Henry now quietly signed a petition supporting the SAR funding initiative. He had proposed their supervisor red-faced approved official cooperation with Henry's tracking workshops. Senator Whitmore herself appeared on national television, her voice breaking slightly. Sometimes we forget that heroes walk among us every day asking nothing, expecting nothing right. But Matthews represents the very best of America, not just for what he did for my family, but for how he did it. That Friday, Henry returned to the woods not as a ghost to be ignored, but as a legend to be followed. 4 young rangers waited at the trailhead, notebooks in hand, ready to learn what only he could teach a month later. As autumn gave way to winter's first breath, the Pinehurst National Forest unveiled a new sign at the main trailhead, carved in sturdy oak and protected by glass. Henry's Watch in honor of those who never quit children. Pause for photos beside it. Tourists inevitably ask, "Who was Henry?" Locals now smile with pride as they tell the story that has become their town's defining legend. Henry never moved to Washington. He turned down book deals, interviews, and speaking engagements. Fame held no appeal for a man who had found peace and solitude. But every morning at dawn, he walks Max along that same trail where he found Emily, no longer alone, now accompanied by aspiring trackers, veterans seeking purpose or simply people drawn to his quiet wisdom. He always pauses at a certain bend in the path, looks up at the towering pines and whispers, something only the forest can hear. Perhaps names from that faded journal, or perhaps a promise to keep watching at the first snowfall each year. Senator Whitmore's granddaughter sends him hand-drawn cards. Her artwork improves with each passing season. Every card ends the same way. "Thank you, Mr. Henry. I still remember your coat smelled like paint and safety. If you believe some heroes don't need a uniform to serve, just heart instinct and courage that never fades. Ironheart stories, because some heroes never stop serving."